Hello, kids. This is the lovable fuzzball, Mr. Moorhead. I'm coming to you live from Moorhead Studios in Garner, North Carolina. Hope you guys had a great break. I hope you played lots of Among Us and made those weird TikTok dance videos. I know that's what I did, kids. So today we are going to learn about a new person, Mary, Queen of Scots, and she is connected to everybody that we have talked about. She is the key kind of in learning what happens with Elizabeth, because Elizabeth never married. Okay, Elizabeth never married. So there's no more tutors. So we kind of need to learn about Mary, Queen of Scots to figure out what happens with Elizabeth. All right, to understand Mary, Queen of Scots, we need to learn a little bit of geography, and then we need to look at the family tree a bit. Now, today, the United Kingdom is England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, which is up here. So you can see on this island, Scotland and England, they touch each other. They are connected, kind of like us and South Carolina. Wales has been part of England for almost 1,000 years, but it is a separate kingdom. So we have England, Wales, and Scotland, again, Northern Ireland over here. Scotland and England have not always been combined as a government. They have not always been combined as one country like they are today. In fact, they've been rivals through much of history. You guys might have seen the movie Braveheart that is talking about a war between the Scots and the English. I've mentioned this before. My family comes from Scotland. They've had several wars throughout history. Scotland has often been the aggravating neighbor to the north for England, and England has been the aggravating neighbor to the south for Scotland. So they haven't always been friends, they have been rivals. Now, through much of Henry VIII's tenure and Henry VII, Scotland and England have had a lot of issues with each other. But we have Henry VII that thinks he can fix this. Okay, now we have talked about two of Henry VII's kids. We talked about Edward. Remember, he died most likely of tuberculosis. And we have talked about Henry VIII with his 6 wives. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. But we did not talk about their sister. Henry VII had a daughter named Margaret. And he is going to use Margaret to attempt to end this issue with Scotland. Scotland and England fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. He's going to try to end it. And here is how he's going to do it. He is going to marry Margaret to the royal family of Scotland. So they will now have this alliance. Remember, royal people did not very often marry for love. They married for, excuse me, not COVID, just clearing my throat. They married for an alliance. Okay, so now she is married off to Scotland. The Scottish royal family, their last name is Stuart. Remember, these people's last name are Tudor. She is now a Stuart, and she will have a kid. This kid will be the Prince of Scotland and eventually becomes the King of Scotland. His name is James Stuart. Except this is where the family reunion is going to get awkward. James will actually go to war with Henry VIII. So James will go to war with his uncle, Henry VIII. Henry will go to war with his nephew, James Stuart, King of Scotland. And James is actually going to be killed in a battle with Henry VIII's English army. Now, he suffers injuries. He doesn't die immediately, but he is given some good news right before he dies. He is given the news that his wife has given birth to a daughter. Her name, Mary. Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary Stuart. Okay? So again, this is Mary Tudor over here. This is Mary Stuart. She is the great-granddaughter of Henry VII. And she is Henry VIII is her great uncle. Mary, Elizabeth, and Edwards are her cousins. Okay? So she is related, although her last name is not Tudor, it is Stuart. Now here is where it's going to get Jerry Springer-ish, kids. Her dad has died. Her dad, James, has died. Henry VIII says, I don't have time to be fooling around with Scotland. He is also in a war with France. He doesn't have time to fool with Scotland. So he is going to attempt to abduct this little girl. He is going to take her and try to marry her to Edward. They're cousins. Hello, they're cousins. They're going to get married. They're cousins. That's Maury Povich stuff, kids, but that's what they were going to do. They were going to cement this alliance. This is like a double marriage. The family has been married twice to each other. That's what they're going to do. So Henry sends out spies to try to find this little girl. The Scottish people are hiding her. Scottish nobles are hiding her. But even a part of Scotland started to say, well, just let the two marry, and then we won't fight each other anymore. So you've got Henry looking for the girl. You've now got some Scottish people also saying she needs to marry Edward. The Scottish people that did not agree are going to take her and form an alliance, form a marriage, a future marriage with France. So this angers Henry VIII, but she is going to marry the Prince of France. Now, she is not safe to stay in Scotland. So her mother and some of the other Scottish nobles, they make this deal, and at about age 5, she'd been hidden most of her life. At age 5, 5.5, she's going to be sent to France. Now, she never really knew her dad. She's not going to know much of her mom because she's been hidden all of this time. And now she has to move to a place that she is completely unfamiliar with. She's not related to these people, and they don't speak the same language. But this might have been a good scenario for her, because the King of France is going to take care of her. He is going to treat her like his very own daughter. There's accounts of people coming in. Most royal people didn't even play with their own kids. They were raised by like nannies, but he would play with her. Like you play like a piggyback, or like he'd be a horsey, and he would play with this little girl. So he becomes, the King of France becomes the dad that she never really had. And she's going to marry his son. So she grows up in what seems like a pretty loving family. Again, we had all this trauma to begin with, but she's going to grow up in this loving family, and she will eventually marry the Prince of France. Now, his name is Francis. He is the Prince of France. That's not tough to remember. France, Francis, it sounds the same. He also dresses like Post Malone. You can see that there. So at any rate, these two, when they get older, they will marry. What is interesting, his mom, his dad is the King of France. His mom is a Medici. She's the great, great, great granddaughter of Cosimo. So I think that's kind of neat. So at any rate, these two will marry. But then this is where the story turns a little tragic. The King of France is going to die. This is the guy that was kind of her dad. All right, kind of stepdad, filled the role of dad. He dies. That's a tragic loss. So she will become Queen of France. Her husband, Francis, becomes king. But within 2 years, he dies. She loses these two very close people to her, and she's no longer queen. She was only queen by marriage. As kind of luck would have it, the way things would work out, she will end up going back to Scotland and becoming the queen there. Now, the period of history we're talking about is absolutism, where they can do absolutely whatever they want, and you see her make some absolute moves here. When she goes back to Scotland, she doesn't want to get involved in the Protestant Reformation, this Scottish versus Catholic deal. She is Catholic, and she doesn't start this, well, we're officially Catholic, we're officially Protestant. She doesn't get involved in it. She gives quite a bit of religious freedom compared to everybody else at that period of history. She doesn't want to engage in this like religious type war or argument. So that's an absolute thing that she does. The next absolute thing she does, she meets a new little man. His name is Lord Darnley, and he is a scoundrel. He is a very, very bad person. Okay? Now, the Scottish nobility said, hey, you're our queen. You came back from France. You're the rightful queen of this area. But don't marry this dude. This dude is a loser. He's constantly like drinking. He's an alcoholic. He's drunk. He steals. He fights a bunch. He's got a lot of problems. Don't marry this guy. And she does something very absolute. She says, I'm marrying him. He's handsome. He's a handsome little man. And sure enough, she marries him. He cheats on her. He is not good to her whatsoever. And then he is going to launch a plot to try to kill her. Tomorrow, kids, I'm going to tell you how our guy, Lord Darnley, is going to attempt to kill his wife, the Queen of Scotland. So when you join me tomorrow, you will get the rest of the story. Bye for now, kids.